प्रभुपाद की जय। ओम विष्णुपाद परमहंस परिविराजकाचार्य अष्टोत्तरशतश्री श्रीमद् भक्ति सिद्धांत सरस्वती गोस्वामी महाराज प्रभुपाद की, अनंत कोटि वैष्णव वृंद की, नामाचार्य हरिदास ठाकुर की। प्रेम से कहो श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासति गौर भक्तवृंद की। श्री श्री राधा कृष्ण गोप गोपीनाथ श्याम कुंड राधा कुंड गिरि गोवर्धन की। वृंदावन मथुरा धाम की, नवद्वीप मायापुर धाम की, जगन्नाथपुरी धाम की, गंगा माई यमुना माई की, भक्ति देवी तुलसी महारानी की, समवेत भक्तवृंद की। गौर प्रेमानंदे। All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Guruvan Gauranga. All glories to Jagat Guru Srila Prabhupada ki. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskrityam Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudirayet Nashtaprayeshu Abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki. So today we are reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto number 3, chapter 21, verse number 55. Adharmascha samedeta Adharmascha samedeta Lolupair Vyankushayr Nribihi Lolupair Vyankushayr Nribihi Shayane Tvai Lokoyam Shayane Tvai Lokoyam Dasyugrasto Vinankshati Dasyugrasto Vinankshati Adharmascha samedeta Lolupai Vyankushayr Nribihi Shayane Tvai Lokoyam Dasyugrasto Vinankshati. Mascha samedeta Lolupai Vyankushayr Nribihi Shayane Tvai Lokoyam Shugrasto Vinakshati. Mascha samedeta Lolupai Vyankushayr Nribihi Shayane Tvai Lokoyam Dasyugrasto Vinakshati. Matajis. Adharmascha samedeta Lolupai Vyankushayr Nribihi Shayane Tvai Lokoyam Dasyugrasto Vinakshati. Adharmascha samedeta Lolupai Vyankushayr Nribihi Shayane Tvai Lokoyam Dasyugrasto vinangshati. Adharmaha, unrighteousness. Cha, and. Samedeta, would flourish. Lolupaihi, simply hankering after money. Vyankushaihi, uncontrolled. Nribihi, by men. Shayanetvai, when you lie down for rest. Lokaha, world. Avyam, this. Dasyu, by the miscreants. Grastaha, attacked. Vinangshati, it will perish. Translation by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki jai. If you gave up all thought of the world's situation, unrighteousness would flourish. For men who hanker only after money would be unopposed. Such miscreants would attack and the world would perish. Purport. Because the scientific division of 4 varnas and 4 ashramas is now being extinguished, the entire world is being governed by unwanted men who have no training in religion, politics or social order, and it is in a very deplorable condition. In the institution of 4 varnas and 4 ashramas, there are regular training principles for the different classes of men. Just as in the modern age, there is a necessity for engineers, medical practitioners and electricians, and they are properly trained in different scientific institutions. Similarly, in former times, the higher social orders, namely the intelligent class, the Brahmanas, the ruling class, the Kshatriyas, and the mercantile class, the Vaishyas, were properly trained. Bhagavad Gita describes the duties of the Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya and Shudra. When there is no such training, one simply claims that because he is born in a Brahmana or Kshatriya family, he is therefore a Brahmana or a Kshatriya, even though he performs the duties of a Shudra. Such undue claims to being a higher caste man make the system of scientific social orders into a caste system, completely degrading the original system. Thus, the society is now in chaos and there is neither peace nor prosperity. It is clearly stated herein that unless there is the vigilance of a strong king, impious, unqualified men will claim a certain status in society, and that will make the social order perish. Thus ends the purport. Om Ajnanati Mirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmitam Ena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasati Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Krupa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So this verse we are discussing, it is spoken by Kardama Muni addressing the King Manu. When Manu visited, the Kardama Muni, basically Manu is offering his respects and glorifying Manu. And this verse is actually very much similar to the yesterday's verse which we have discussed. It is pretty close. They are both talking about the Varnashrama Dharma. And this topic of Varnashrama, it is very commonly discussed topic. There are many lectures by Prabhupada, so many devotees give so many lectures on this topic of Varnashrama. And in our previous class, Patita Pavan Prabhu, he also described about this Varnashrama system. So in this class, what I would like to do is that I would like to explain this Varnashrama system using the principles of Sankhya Yoga and then trying to integrate the Bhakti Yoga into it. So again, some devotees may be thinking, why do I talk so much about Sankhya and philosophy, all those things? But the reason is that, first of all, we are in the third canto. The third canto is, primarily, it's about Sankhya philosophy. And again, we'll come across Sankhya philosophy in the 11th canto. So this is the opportunity we have, and this is the opportunity we have time to to discuss about this Sankhya Yoga. Try to understand all these principles nicely, and it is also a part of the Bhagavatam, right? That means that we are meant to understand those things. So, the only problem is that it may not be sounding very esoteric compared to the 10th canto or other cantos like that. But actually, Sankhya Yoga is also a very esoteric subject. A lot of our previous acharyas wrote many books, and they have used a lot of principles from Sankhya Yoga. Like for example, you might have heard the book Madhurya Kadambini. Like it all talks about the mind, how the mind is conditioned, how to uncondition your mind, anarthas and all those things. Again, it's all based on the principles of Sankhya Yoga, just analytical understanding of mind, body and soul. And similarly, the word Atma, basically it has three meanings. Atma means body, Atma means soul, Atma means also mind. So that means that when you're a self-realized person, it doesn't mean, it's not that just Atma, but you know your mind, your body, your soul, all three together. That makes a self-realized person. And also recently there's one more book published called Sankalpa Kaumudi by His Holiness Shivaram Swami. Even in that book also he kind of uses a lot of principles from Sankhya Yoga, trying to understand the mind and how to perform our sadhana very nicely. So now coming back to our subject, so the subject is Varnashrama Dharma. It's basically the 4 Varnas and 4 Ashramas. And in the current society, in the present society we are living in, actually there is too much confusion, right? There's so much confusion for the students, which specialization to select. Should I become a doctor? Should I become an engineer? Right? And which course to take, which university to go, which dress to wear, which person to marry, right? So the confusion has extended so much that even people are confused about even their gender, whether they're a man or a woman, correct? There's so much of confusion going on. So even Arjuna had a confusion in the beginning of Bhagavad Gita, right? When the battle of Kurukshetra began, even Arjuna had a lot of confusion, and Krishna cleared all his confusions. Because there are two things. One thing is that we should know what is Shastra, and the second thing is that we should also know how to apply those principles of Shastra in our everyday life. And for that, basically for both, to know the Shastra and also to apply the Shastra, basically we need a Guru. Guru is required in both the situations. Otherwise, what happens is that it's like one blind man, guiding the other blind man. Both are blind. They don't know where they're going. And in India, especially, in order to answer all these confusing things, what we have done is that we have developed a system called Varnashrama system. So people are not confused. Everybody knows clearly what to do, what not to do, and according to their inborn nature, everything is clear. So again, even this Varnashrama Dharma, it's the base philosophy is Sankhya Yoga, nothing more than that. It's basically Sattva Guna, Rajoguna and Tamoguna. And this Varnashrama system is not something which is like a man-made thing, but it is actually created by God himself. Krishna himself has set up this system, right? In Bhagavad Gita chapter 4:13 he says, Chaturvarna Maya system guna karma vibhagasa tasya kartaram apimam vidhi akritaram avyayam. According to the 3 modes of nature and the work associated with them, the 4 divisions of human society are created by me. And although I am the creator of this system, you should know that I am yet the non-doer, being unchangeable. So as it is said, basically this Varnashrama system is developed or is established based on the 3 modes of nature. You have Brahmana, who is in the mode of goodness. There is Kshatriya in the mode of passion and goodness. Vaishya in the mode of passion and ignorance. And you have Shudra in the mode of ignorance. So, and based upon one's, Varna and Karma and Guna, one is, recommended different activities. And, but however, now we know that we no longer have this Varnashrama system, still going on, there's so many challenges and problems. So the current situation is that some of the challenges in Varnashrama system is that, to begin with, first of all, people doesn't even know what is their nature to begin with, right? Because back in the days, when the student goes to a guru, the guru will analyze what kind of a nature this student is having, and accordingly he will train according to his nature. But today there is no such system. People doesn't even know what kind of guna they are having. And second thing is that, okay, let's say that even you know your varna, you're a brahmana or a kshatriya or a shudra. The second thing is that where is the work? Where is a job which will fit your varna, right? I mean, of course, you have, if you're a brahmana, you could become a professor, but it's to some extent okay, but it's not like a perfect brahminical thing, because a brahmana never accepts money. He's never employed. So, there is no perfect job to fit that society, that nature a person is having also. And second thing is that basically there is lack of teachers, who can teach all these things nicely, and there is no strong king or the government to protect that varnashrama system, and who can train and protect the system. So these are some of the challenges we are having in establishing and following the varnashrama system. Now, this will give rise to so many questions. So, again, is it possible to re-establish the varnashrama system? How many of you think that we can re-establish the varnashrama system? Okay. And okay, even if we establish the varnashrama systems, then how is it this varnashrama actually relevant to our practice of bhakti? I mean, because we know bhakti is ahaituki, it doesn't depend upon all these things. So how much is it relevant? And let's say even if you want to establish, how much time are you going to take, right? I mean, whether you will be still alive or maybe your children will enjoy that. But the problem is right now, I have to take advantage of that, right? But it is not, unless you go to some farm community or something like that, that's a different thing. And the other question comes is that how to practice bhakti in the current setup where there is no varnashrama system and which is not favorable, for this varnashrama setup. And the other thing is that, can I practice bhakti without knowing my nature and engaging in the work not related to my nature? Actually, this is most of the cases, because people, they engage in jobs, but their nature, their job just doesn't really match actually, and they're not really happy. But they have to do it because of so many external reasons. So in this class, I'm not going to answer any of these questions, but what I will do is that I will try to explain the metaphysics of Sankhya. So once you understand the Sankhya philosophy, you will automatically able to answer all these questions. Okay. So let's go back to the fundamental aspect. As we all know that we are basically a spirit soul. We are not the body, but we are a spirit soul. Now, however, because we are conditioned, right? We are conditioned, we have a human, we have a body, material body. This body can either be a human form or an animal form, or even plants, even those are also included. So our real identity is actually not a human, male, female, not a plant, tree. Basically our essential nature is that we are a spirit soul, but we are just conditioned now. And that is actually the first teachings of Bhagavad Gita also. Krishna also begins by his teachings by saying that you are not the body, but you are a spirit soul. Dehinosmin yata dehe kaumaram yavanam jara. Right? So as the soul passes through all these phases, that means that you are neither a human nor a animal nor a plant. You are basically a spirit soul. But this material body, no matter which body you have, whether an animal body or a human body, there is something in common. What is common is that the way it is built. The way it is built, which means that there are 10 external senses, and then we have one internal sense, which is mind. This is common for everybody. For a human being, for an animal, this thing is the same. It's just like slight difference here and there, but more or less the same. And this mind, basically this mind actually has 4 parts in it. So those 4 parts, basically it is called Antakarana Chatushtaya, means the fourfold inner subtle self. So this mind, as you can see here, it is called as an internal sense organ. And you have external sense organs. You have 10 external sense organs, knowledge acquiring, and those senses which you perform your action. And this internal sense, it has 4 things. It has chitta, ahankara, buddhi, and manas. And above this chitta is basically the soul. The soul is above it, above all these things. It doesn't touch all these things. The soul is something which is beyond all these material things. And just to give a brief explanation, I already explained this in my previous class briefly, that we have 10 external senses, and then the internal senses, manas, that whenever there's a perception happening through our external senses, they feed the information into a manas. And the primary quality of a manas is that it basically adds emotions and feelings. That's all manas does. And the next thing is a buddhi. Above manas is buddhi. And this buddhi is basically intelligence. It gives a discriminative power. This is good, this is bad. It will try to analyze the information, all that stuff. And above the buddhi is ahankara. And ahankara, what ahankara does is that it gives a sense of identity. Right, that you are an American, you are an Indian, you are a man, you are a woman, right? Accordingly, buddhi relies on that ahankara, to kind of analyze that information and, feed it back to the senses. And above the ahankara is chitta. And chitta is basically where it stores all the memories, all the past life memories, and everything is stored there. And this chitta, what happens is that this chitta influences the feelings and emotions of the manas. That is why this is exactly called as samskaras. Samskaras are nothing but those impressions which from your past lives, from your, or even not only past life, but also during this life in the Garbhadana samskara, when a woman is pregnant, right? The samskaras are being built in a child. That is why, there is a lot of purificatory activities that are recommended in the Vedas. That is because of these things. That is because of, to not to have any negative samskaras in the child's chitta. And primarily, coming from this life, during the conception, birth, and also from the previous life, and also many more lives, but primarily these the samskaras coming from the past life and the Garbhadana are more strong actually, and this affects the manas of the child. And the soul is above all these things, including chitta. Everything on the right side is material, and the soul is on the left side is spiritual. And the soul basically, it reflects the consciousness onto the chitta, and the chitta, in turn communicates with the ahankara and so on, and it manifests in the gross senses. And if someone wants to understand more of this, I would recommend, studying the 27th chapter of the 3rd canto. We're going to come, because right now in the 21st chapter, when we get to the 27th chapter, we have a more in detail explanation of all these things. Like one verse here is, it's 13th verse, which says, the self-realized soul is thus reflected first in the threefold ego, then in the body, senses, and mind. This is just a beginning shloka, but there are many more shlokas. Essentially, it kind of trying to explain this metaphysics of how the mind, body, the soul are, arranged. So now that we understand this setup, as Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, ultimately, we have to use this mind to deliver ourselves, right? Atmanevahi atmanod bandhur, atmaneva nipur atmana. One must deliver himself with the help of this mind and not degrade himself. Thus the mind is a friend of the conditioned soul and his enemy as well. Because ultimately, for us to not to be liberated, we have to cleanse our mind, cheto darpana marjanam, and that is done using the mind basically. And then especially the primary focus is laid on actually on manas and buddhi, because in the human form of life, what happens is that you can strengthen the buddhi, but whereas in animals actually it's more on manas especially, because there's no much intelligence. You can tame a dog, like you can make a dog intelligent, but you cannot, there's certain limitations. You can't make a dog liberated, right? So it's more of a manas there, but only in the human form of life, what happens is that this buddhi, you can strengthen this buddhi to an extent where you can liberate yourself. So that is a unique opportunity which is only possible in the human form of life. It's not possible in the animal form of life. So that is why, as Krishna says, that one has to make use of this mind to liberate your own, your soul. And when a living entity takes birth, there are two things. You have karma, right? This karma, again, karma has two things. Karma means action. Karma also means something which you have done, which is coming from your past birth. So like you do good things, you get good things in this life, right? Krishna says, right? You take birth in a good family, because if you are having a good karma, right? If you are having a bad karma, you take birth in an impious family, right? And you have good karma, you can take a human form of life. Otherwise, you can take an animal form of life. So karma is there. Basically, the karma is determining your body, what kind of a body you're going to get, and what place and what family you're going to take birth. And the next thing is the guna, or the psyche. So this psyche, basically guna, is actually coming from the chitta. because the primary influence is coming from the chitta, because that is kind of determining the what kind of mindset you may be having, right? And that is where this Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra is coming into. It's basically all based upon this guna. If primarily if you're having more of a goodness, that means that you're more like a Brahminical in nature. If you're more of a passion, it's more of a Kshatriya nature, and Shudra means more of a Tamoguna. Again, the soul it's beyond all these things. It's just because of the psycho-physical setup what you're having, these gunas are kind of appearing to you. I mean, it's kind of influencing you. And and even in the animals also, you have sattvic animals like cow, it's like a sattvic, and you have rajasic like tiger, like tamasic like a polar bear, it always sleeps. So everywhere, ultimately, it kind of boils down to these three modes of nature: sattva, rajas, and tamas. And above all these things is ahankara. Ahankara, it basically gives you an identity that because let's say that you take an animal form, that ahankara kind of adjusts to think that you're a dog, you have to act in that way. Or if you take a form of a human and a man especially, then ahankara also automatically takes that shape where it kind of tells you what to do, right? So ahankara is also basically, it is an appropriating factor. What appropriating factor basically means that it is trying to all the work is done by buddhist manas and senses, but ahankara appropriates saying that I am doing this, nothing more than that. It just takes the ownership. And in the practice of yoga, primarily in the practice of yoga, what we are trying to do is that we are trying to purify this mind. We are trying to purify this chitta. So that is one of the key principles in the yoga practice. And this ahankara, there are two ways we can deal with this ahankara. One is that you either dissolve this ahankara because it's just something matter, that right? And then or you transform your ahankara in such a way that you offer it to Krishna, that you surrender to Krishna. And that is a liberation basically. Liberation means either you get personal liberation or impersonal liberation. Impersonal means basically you're trying to dissolve your ahankara, or you get a personal liberation when you want to surrender to Krishna and transform your ahankara and identifying yourself as a servant of God. So that is liberation. So that's the core principles of any yoga. Doesn't matter which yoga you are following. This is a whole key principle. And the varnashrama basically is set up to facilitate this process, right? What does varnashrama do? In the varnashrama, the first thing is that we try to identify what is your guna or what is your ahankara, correct? Because you have your own inbuilt nature, your guna. And once you identify your guna, then you can be trained, right? You can be trained accordingly and you can be engaged accordingly. All those things can happen. So that is why it's called training the buddhi. Because buddhi is not trained. When a person is born, manas is there, but buddhi is never trained. That means that there should be some training process. That is where you accept a guru, right? And you acquire the material knowledge and spiritual knowledge and control the manas. And after that, what happens? Then what happens is that once you know your nature and once that nature is, kind of polished by a guru, right? And the next thing is that you perform that action. And in that action, there are actually two things. Actually, karma yoga, usually when we talk about karma yoga, primarily we emphasized on surrender aspect, the yajna, that karmananyatra. But actually, there are two things. There is two things. One is karma sukaushalam, means perfection in what activity what you're doing, and offering it to Krishna. There are both. But primarily we focus more on the yajnatma karmananyatra, which is basically offering it to Krishna, because this karma kaushalam, it is not possible in the current setup, because it is, you need varnashrama system, for the karma kaushalam to really happen. And we don't really have that system. So perfection in the work itself is very difficult without varnashrama system. But however, the sacrifice is easy because everybody has their own nature, they have their own work. We just offer it to Krishna. But in varnashrama, that is why in India, if you go, especially in South India, if you see those temples, like the kind of perfection in the art, they have reached their ultimate. Like there is nothing beyond, right? Because that is possible because of varnashrama system. Because the training was there, the lineage was there, and they were able to master that art, right? And of course, they do it for Bhagavan. They offer it to the God. So there is a conception of both the perfection in work and yoga. Means karma yoga. Karma is there, yoga is there. Both are there. And then once you further progress, then when the spiritual knowledge, fructification of knowledge is there, then you gradually surrender to Bhagavan, right? That is where you transform your ahankara and you surrender to Bhagavan and practice bhakti. And that is where and that is where you reach to the perfection where you can say that you are the servant of God, and you practice bhakti yoga, and the last, right? Bhagavad Gita also, it begins by Krishna talking about Arjuna's nature, but as it goes more towards the surrender, or it goes more towards offering everything as a bhakti. So, and then what happens once there is surrender or bhakti, then the chitta is cleansed, the mind is purified, and a person is eligible for liberation. But now the problem is that now when we don't have varnashrama system, this ahankara is not established properly. People don't know, they're confused, they don't know what their nature is, they don't know what to do, right? Sometimes when I engage, a lot of volunteers, sometimes they come on Sunday. I ask them, what do you do? Are you a student? Do you do any job? What is your skill? So that, at least I try to engage him in certain way. Once you know what you are, what your interest is, then I can find out some service which kind of suits your nature so that I can engage you. But if that itself is not there, because I meet some people, they're very confused. They don't even know. Like one time, once they want to be a doctor, other time they want to be an engineer, other time they want to be a singer. I mean, you don't really have an identity, then, there's no traction there. It's very difficult to get hold of them and engage them. It's very difficult. This is what happens when you don't have varnashrama, because you don't have that consolidated ahankara where it can be, used in the God service. But the thing is that now we are not just following a classical yoga, we are bhakti yogis. Our primary thing is bhakti. And as we all know, that bhakti is something which is beyond varnashrama, right? You should be able to engage a person in bhakti, which is beyond varnashrama. So what is the solution here? How do we practice bhakti when we do not have a varnashrama system, and we do not have a properly trained, this ahankara and all this manas and buddhi? How do we do that? So if you see this in varnashrama system, actually the focus is given on both. The focus is given on perfection of work and also on surrender aspect. Both are there. But in the bhakti, if you see, primarily the focus is given on surrender, right? It is, if you're a good artist, it's nice, but even if you're not a good artist, that's all right, but our primary focus is to do it for God, do it for Bhagavan, inculcate that mood of surrender, right? That is why even Krishna says, yat karoshi, yat ashnachi, yat jugosi, in the dati yat. Basically, that is what Krishna is telling, just whatever you have, whatever you do, just offer it to me. Because see, ultimately the perfection of yoga is in surrender, right? If that doesn't happen, everything else is just a waste of time, right? You may be a perfect, so and so, but unless that is brought to a point where it is surrendered to Bhagavan, it is a material thing. There is no real, use of that thing. So that is why in the bhakti, the primary focus is given on surrender, right? And that is why when you have chitta, ahankara, buddhi and manas, in the other forms of yoga, what happens is that it's more like an ascending process. Ascending means, you control your mind, you control your buddhi, you transform your ahankara, you transform your chitta. It's like an ascending process. But in the bhakti yoga, we do actually opposite. What we do is that first itself we go and attack the ahankara. Right? It's like, conquering a king. Once the king is conquered, all the soldiers, doesn't matter how strong they are, they automatically come in control. So similarly, when we attack this ahankara by saying that, Jiver Swarup Hoy Krishna Nitya Das, basically that means that you are attacking the ahankara of the person and telling basically, destroying it and making an identity that you are the servant of God. Then automatically the other things kind of follows up. We don't really need to worry too much about those things. So that is, how the Bhakti Yoga approaches this, Chittavritti Nirodha, or Chetodarpana Marjanam. And again, if someone wants to know more about this, I would actually recommend reading in the Bhakti Sandarbha, where the Jiva Goswami explains about different forms of bhakti, right? We don't use karma yoga, jnana yoga. Instead, we say karma mishra bhakti, jnana mishra bhakti, how it establishes and comes. It's basically bhakti is the primary factor there. Bhakti means surrender. That means that right from the day one, you are beating on the aspect of surrender. And karma jnana, eventually, we deal with it, we gradually purify it to it, where it reaches to an ultimate platform of the Kevala Bhakti. And the other most powerful principle what we use is actually Yukta Vairagya. This Yukta Vairagya is very much relevant, especially when there is no Varnashrama system. Because in the Varnashrama system, everything is very clearly defined, right? Brahmana, Vaishya, Shudra, Kshatriya, what you can take, what lifestyle you want to have. It's very clearly defined. But when we don't have this, actually Yukta Vairagya is a very, very powerful principle where we can use, especially in the practice of bhakti, where, anasakta vishayan. So, where, I would like to read this statement by Prabhupada. Even though a devotee may engage in apparent materialistic activities, he knows his position very well. Nirbandhe Krishna Sambandhe Yukta Vairagya Muchyate. If one engages all material things in relationship with loving service of the Lord, one is situated in Yukta Vairagya, proper renunciation. In this material world, nothing should be accepted for one's sense gratification. Everything should be accepted for the service of Lord. That is a mentality of spiritual world. You see here, basically, that's what we are trying to, do here. By everything should be accepted in the service of God. So the conception of the devotion and service is right there from the day one. And then the karma, everything kind of follows up, and it's not a problem. So we as a practicing devotees, so we should understand this. This one thing we should understand, that how much is our ahankara transformed. How much is it, because that is the indication of our surrender to Bhagavan, basically. That how much are we surrendered, how much of ahankara is transformed. It doesn't matter whether, how clean your body is, how clean your mind is, how sattvic you are. Unless you come to a point where your ahankara is transformed to an extent that, you identify yourself as a servant of God, actually our perfection is not fully there yet. Yeah. So that is the whole point of Varnashrama. Even though we don't have it, this is the core philosophy, right, of what we are trying to do. Because when we know the destination, it doesn't matter which route you take, you know where you are getting to. Then it's the clarity is there in the mind, right? Yeah, nothing more than that. I would like to end my class here. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Just 5 more minutes. If you want any questions, yeah. Yeah. You have mic? Mic.
Hare Krishna, thank you for a wonderful class. I was wondering, a lot of times when I see the Ayurveda diagram of Sankhya, when Prakriti and Purusha mix, first comes Buddhi, then comes Ahankara, and then from Ahankara, Manas and senses.
There is a difference.
And I was wondering if there is a reason.
This Sankhya, basically, Sankhya is a foundation for all Indian schools of philosophy. Right? Everybody uses Sankhya philosophy. Vedanta uses Sankhya, Yoga uses Sankhya, Bhagavatam uses Sankhya, everybody uses Sankhya, but there is a slight difference in the way they organize things. Because even Krishna says in the 11th canto that, different yogis, arrange it in a different way. That is natural.
So is Buddhi more subtle than Ahankara, or is Ahankara more subtle?
Yes, Ahankara is the most subtlest thing. Because that is why it is more subtle, it is very difficult to conquer. Because that is why when you do yoga, it's easy to control the senses because it's just physical, but which is something which is more subtle, it is more difficult to control. That is why something which is subtle, you have to fight with subtle, right? So that is where bhakti is coming, because bhakti is more subtle. It can fight with the subtle elements, whereas the asanas is more gross and it can only control the gross senses. The most subtlest thing is actually chitta. That is why it is the most difficult thing to purify.
Thank you.
Thank you, Prabhu. And my question is, let's see how can I put this question. We have seen that most of the time in our rich programs, we distribute so many books, hoping that someone will come and join.
Yes.
And we have this challenge. We see that when they come, they probably, even if some devotees we've seen, they join for a certain time and they leave.
Yeah.
Now, the other side is some devotees, they emphasize more bhakti yoga, which is, I agree with that.
Yeah.
But some devotees, they don't put much emphasis in varnashram dharma, like trying to explain it. So the conflict is there. But we have that challenge to actually see how to combine properly. So, because even devotees, after some time, you say, I'm not practicing Varnashram Dharma, but actually we don't have the samskars.
Yeah, see, I understand. The problem is that, all these problems comes from a dissatisfaction. See, the dissatisfaction is the root of all the problems. Because a person, when he's satisfied, he will not have all these questions. The problem is that, in the Varnashrama system, in all these systems, basically, these things are basically, very much helpful especially in the gross sense level, manas and buddhi level, correct? And which is kind of immediately perceivable. Just like one example I'll give you. I used to always have this doubt. Instead of chanting for 2 hours, if I do yoga for 2 hours, I will feel much more, I will feel much more relaxed and much more calm in my mind, correct? That's a genuine question. I used to have all this question all the time. So then why do I have to chant 16 rounds? Why do I just not do yoga for 2 hours? And this chanting I'm doing for many years, but I don't really see much happening. Whereas if I do yoga, that's much more powerful. See, this is a problem. The problem is that because we are more sensitive and we are kind of more perceiving things which are on the gross platform, right? But however, in bhakti, we are not dealing with the gross level. We are dealing with the highest, subtlest thing, which is chitta, which is the most difficult thing to deal with. And when we don't practice that bhakti properly, we don't have that effect. We don't see that effect. That means, because this is like a nuclear science, right? Like, just like, when you're doing construction business, in construction, it doesn't matter if 1 inch here and there, it doesn't really matter. But let's say you're a nuclear scientist, means you have to do perfect. Like accuracy should be there, like very perfect. Otherwise, that is why need of a guru is very, very important. Otherwise, if you don't do the process, that means that you don't see the effect. When you don't see the effect, then you're dissatisfied. But whereas, when you do yoga, when you do, eat organic food, when you do all these things, that is manifest in the gross level, which can be immediately perceived by anybody. Even a person who doesn't do yoga can immediately feel that effect. But the thing is that, the chitta vritti, that is why when you really understand chitta, and when you say chitta vritti nirodha, it is very scary. Like, if you really understand the properties of chitta, and how subtle it is, and how difficult it is to purify, and how ahankara is very strong, and how, it's not a joke, it's very, very serious business. But that is only possible when you really, practice bhakti yoga, when you really understand it. But it's very difficult. A lot of devotees, I don't mean to be critical, but the thing is that, you need to study, you need to understand, you need to read a lot of Prabhupada books, you need to deeply understand what exactly is Bhakti Yoga is, Once you really understand Bhakti Yoga, then you'll not feel dissatisfied. And Bhakti is so strong and so powerful that even a great yogis cannot, do that. And because it's only possible with the mercy of the Guru. Otherwise, chitta vritti, you can ask me, it's not so easy. It's not so easy, yeah. Chitta vritti nirodha. It's the most subtlest thing to purify. The more subtle it is, the more powerful it is. Even the gross senses itself, you are not able to control. Forget about subtle senses, controlling them and purifying them. Anyway, this is Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Jagadguru Srila Prabhupada ki jai.